Hello friends, Jennifer Pearson here, very belatedly doing a tag started by Bronia, and I think she titled it Taking It Back to Tarot. And I'm going to depart from the way she did it, partly because I've covered stuff on my channel before and I don't journal as intensively as she did or does, and also for a reason I just forgot. I opened my mouth and it's gone. In any case, she just wanted to talk about her journey with the tarot, and she wanted to hear about other people's journey with the tarot, or for me, tarot and oracle cards, card reading in general. And I had to give that a long sit because I wasn't sure what to focus on. And so in the end, I'm not going to focus on anything. But I have divided into two parts. One is chronology and the material journey, like decks. And then the second one is more spiritual or psychological type of a journey, I guess you would call it. So maybe how I have developed as a card reader. So materially, and I'm just going to get some, these decks are mildly relative to what I'm going to say. I'm using them primarily just to flip through while I talk. So, as a number of people know, I was introduced to cards. I think I knew of card reading from a card reading I had at an elementary school fair and other places that I'd seen it. So I knew about card reading, but, I didn't feel like that, is it curious? Sure. Would I ever have sought it out? No. I learned about it mainly through was brought into it in a very subtle way, which I then took the reins into my own hands, by my sister, who was participating in like therapy groups or something where they were pulling cards. Not tarot cards, not your normal oracle cards. It's kind of like how many people came into card pulling, card reading through the soul cards that were used among therapists. I don't know if it was the angel cards. I don't know what it was. Anyway, it came up. And then when I moved to California, I ended up with a roommate. I don't know, I might have gotten, I don't know. I'm not going to try, this is why, this is a little problematic. I'm not going to try to reconstruct events in their order, because frankly I don't remember. But rough chronology. And then when I was living in California, I had a roommate who had the mother piece, which was definitely not something I was remotely interested in, despite being raised by a feminist and being feminist myself. It just didn't appeal to me at all. And so I don't know if I must have gone to a store there or whatever my next step was, but I think it was in California somewhere. Certainly it was in California, in Santa Cruz, that I purchased a book about the tarot, but that book was about Tarot de Marseille. It was being used as the model. And then I picked up the Celtic Tarot, was it by Courtney Davis? Do I have that name right, Lark? She's my corrector on that. And beautiful, beautiful deck. Really interesting guidebook, but I essentially how the mythology that was being brought into the tarot meshed with the tarot or the cards was a little confusing to me. And it's a pip deck, so I was never able to use it without the book. Did I take notes? Yes. Do I still have the sheets, or did I recently throw them away? Kind of a nostalgia thing. I kept them for longer than I needed them. But I did essentially feel like I still needed them, or wanted to keep them, until really I got the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which I was completely unaware of for all of those years. And it was like when I got that deck, it was easy read. It was like, all right, I get it. I mean, yes, the courts are a little, you have to fit your ideas about personality and stuff into them. But the majors I already knew, because they don't change that much from deck to deck. And yeah, so I could just read the illustrations. It could also be that an art history class that I had in the meantime made me better able to interpret those images. But so I don't know if the Rider-Waite-Smith would have worked for me way back or not. So this was all happening in the 80s, mid to late 80s, when I was in my mid to late 20s. That I kind of had an introduction. I kept that Celtic Tarot for quite some time, but eventually decided to let it go. And somewhere along the line, I ended up with this deck. I don't know if I had it at the same time as, or got it after, or if I even got it before the tarot deck. I don't know. But this one stuck. This is the medicine cards, and this I have had throughout all of that time. So from, again, kind of that mid to late 80s period, the cards I had the Celtic Tarot, then I let it go. Then I had the medicine cards and the angel cards, the Spirit of the Wheel medicine deck. I don't even remember when I got that. I never really jived well with it. But it's like for 20 years then. For 20 years, that was it. This was my main deck. And when I think about it, I think there's partly... well, there's a number of reasons probably, but you know, I was living how would you say, like a life, a more active life. You know, I was working with horses, I was working with dogs, I was working in pet stores, I was working and working. And I was, you know, I went back to school in my early 30s to study literature, and so there was just, I guess I feel like decks are for questioning, and there was only so much questioning going on. There's checking in with yourself. I liked with the medicine cards to do to start the year with 12 cards and then kind of check in with it every month, that kind of thing. But I can't say I did any of it religiously. But yeah, I was just living life, and these were mainly for occasional check-ins. But then, in probably was my late 40s, I decided I wanted to get back. I wanted to try tarot again and really get into it. But I was engaged at that time with a gentleman who, I don't know, that made him uneasy. It's like he wasn't religious, but he was raised in religious traditions. This is the Golden Art Nouveau for anybody who is interested. Again, just here for decoration as I talk. But he was so steeped in certain attitudes. It's like I was really surprised that he would have retained these anxieties or about like tarot or things of that nature. I mean, I won't say too much more about that, but anyway, he did, and I thought, well, whatever, you know, I don't need to do it. It was just something I thought would be fun to do, and if, you know, if it weirds him out, or if he thinks it will somehow endanger me in the community, because it's such a closed-minded community, then whatever, I don't have to do it. I still had my medicine cards and everything, so I just kind of let it go at that point. That relationship went by the wayside. Not for that reason at all. Other issues. And I got to a point in my teaching. The work that I was doing was teaching English as a second language, and it was like all of my interactions with people were so analytical. And so I wanted to do something intuitive, and I said, all right, I don't really care what other people think. I could potentially just do it online. It doesn't have to be something I do locally anyway. And so I decided to jump in. And what I wanted to do was to read for other people, because my life, by that point, I was in my 50s, and my life was already dull. There wasn't too much for me to read about myself. So it was definitely wanting to somehow read for other people, and just have that be an interaction and an intuitive engagement with other people. Helping them in an intuitive way rather than in the intellectual or analytical way that I was doing it for my day job. And so I was searching for a deck, and that's when I discovered the plethora, all of the decks, and that led me to like researching, well, which one of these decks do I want? And that led me to YouTube, you know. And even more plethora of decks, just tons, yeah. So I'm not gonna, because this is gonna be way too long if I do, I'm not gonna go into a lot of detail, but so I got some decks and went on to Biddy Tarot. I initially got Oracle decks that I thought were easy readers, and went on to Biddy Tarot with the goal of seeing if I could do it, if I could even read for other people. I'd read for my sister. I don't know if there were any friends I had also probably read for over the years, but I had no idea if I could read for other people, let alone read in that kind of a context where they're not even in your presence. And I had a goal, a specific goal, when I went on Biddy Tarot to, and if anybody doesn't know, it's an online platform where people get free readings. And I wanted to do 100 readings. That was my goal. And so when I would get somebody and I would do the reading for them, and I would share with them that this is my goal, to do 100 free readings just for practice, and they could send whoever they wanted to me, and just letting them, you know, telling them that it's free. And so sometimes I would get somebody on Biddy Tarot, and then they would recommend a friend to me and a mother to me, you know. So it wasn't that hard to get 100 out of that. And the way the platform is set up, you get to choose how much comes to you. So that was interesting, and I found I could do it, and I got some good feedback, and then I started a YouTube channel, and pretty much doing the zodiac sign readings, like general readings, love readings, career readings. I tried various things. And that's what my channel was initially. And that made me look at, I'm getting into deck accumulation now, at what decks were good for love readings, particularly would bring out those messages, and or for career readings, and or for specific signs of the zodiac, you know, according to their character and things like that. So, you know, what decks were just general readers. So that got me a little deeper too into seeing all of the different, the plethora, all of the different kinds of decks there were out there. And this is Tarot Illuminati. Has been in the past a favorite of people doing those kinds of readings, those kinds of zodiac sign readings. Still is for some people. What was I going to say? So yeah, I just wanted to distinguish that I initially got onto YouTube not to share decks or deck collecting or video tags or you know, VRs or anything like that. I initially I was watching those things to some degree, but I initially got on to actually do general readings for others, those kinds of general readings, to practice the art of reading cards and providing messages, and you know, I just, yeah, to engage my intuitive faculty on a regular basis. But then, as it started to ramp up, I mean, that's where most of my subscribers come from on this channel, was from that period. Like 95% of my subscribers come from that period when I was doing those zodiac sign readings, years ago now. But what would it have been, 6 or 7 years? About 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years, not that long ago. But now the competition is so fierce for this sort of thing that when I start another channel, as I have done, you know, I'm not getting that kind of response. So, but what I found was, while I was teaching, while I had that job, in fact, I probably had 2 jobs at that point, but it was mainly the teaching because of the amount of speaking I had to do while teaching. You know, my voice would just get very ragged if I tried to build the channel up to a point where it was making any kind of income. It was too much talking. My vocal cords couldn't handle it. And I also didn't have really the time to do it because I was actually working 2 jobs, not 2 full-time jobs, but I have my issue with fatigue, and so I would like get ramped up, and I think the most I ever made was like $100 a month, like 1 month or something, and then I would have to like ditch it. And I finally just thought, all right, never mind, I'm not going to try to do this anymore. It's clearly too much for me. And so I gave that up on this channel, and I went to just, you know, sharing decks and, you know, talking about decks and doing VRs and, you know, fun, you know, totally hobby fun. And doing readings for myself and sometimes others, but not doing it as intensively as I had before, and I had done readings professionally, and again had to stop that. My health is just too weird, and so I gave that up. And then my health started to improve. So in that period, I also had a hysterectomy, and that sent me into a downward spiral. It's like, so, but then I came back up out of that and actually got a full-time job. And at that point, that's when I stopped doing any kind of really readings, paid readings for others, professional readings, and wasn't trying to do that at all because I was just had fingers crossed that I could keep my full-time job, as in my health, that my health wouldn't be undermined by doing that. So that's when I guess I kind of got, that's when I started to indulge, when I kind of left doing the readings for the zodiac signs, those general readings, is when I started to really indulge more in looking at all of the different decks. My income was still limited, so it's not like I could, gather a lot in. But it was more indulgent kinds of purchases because I wasn't doing that much in the way of reading. But the feeling was that I was doing catch-up, because for so many years I had no idea that there was all of these decks out there from all of these decades that I had actually lived through and could have. It's like I don't know if you past FOMO, retro FOMO, I don't know what you'd call it. So yeah, I indulged in a bunch of deck purchases and deck trades for the things that didn't work out, for like the love and career readings that I'd had high hopes for and didn't work out for me. I did a lot of trading at that point. And in the last 2 years that has slowed down, and now my health has taken another dive, and and so my income, of course, has taken a dive as well. But it came in a sense, as far as deck purchasing is concerned, it came at a good time because I feel right now like I have a wealth of decks on my shelves. And now I want to address, I'm going to shift focus here. This will probably be shorter, but the art of asking questions. So I would say in my, if we ask, what is YouTube good for in terms of your tarot development? Well, there is the whole plethora of decks thing and the deck collecting thing. Certainly there are lots of learning videos out there. And I wish, Kellyanne Maddox comes to mind. And I can't, there's somebody else that, that was years ago. Again, I'm not remembering. But wonderful, videos that help you think, learn, think about your tarot use. But to me, it is kind of the sharing of spreads and questions. It's the art of asking questions and what questions to ask. So I would say prior to getting involved in the general YouTube community, and that's of course the other great thing, is the sense of community that develops here on YouTube, is that I would use tarot and oracle, mostly oracle, for emotional and situational awareness, like what is going on, or what will go on, or what will be important in this time. But it was, and certainly, like I said, emotional awareness as well, in terms of my reaction to things, other people's reactions to things, but, mainly the clarity, on what's going on beneath the surface. But I would say that probably the most valuable thing that I have gotten out of being part of the YouTube community, which has been a big part of tarot for me because I live in such a closed community in terms of, I have done in-person readings here among some more open-minded people who I have found like in the last couple of years. And I've done some I found a coffee shop owner who was perfectly happy to have me sit down and read. But I didn't do that very much. Again, my health, I can't do anything very regularly. I have to prioritize it, so if I'm feeling tired that day, I don't go. But most of my activity and sharing has been here on YouTube. And there have been, there's so many different and interesting people here on YouTube, and so we get all of these different and interesting tarot tags, and spreads that are brought out, and different kinds of questions that are asked at different times of the year. And so I feel like that opened my mind and my tarot practice to asking things that would never have occurred to me otherwise. So, you've got people asking questions of the Fae, connecting to earth spirits using the tarot, especially in the Samhain period, right? Spirits of place, guardian spirits. I remember, I'll bring out just this past spring. And this was a time when I also, as I was healing from my hysterectomy, I got more deeply into chakras and chakra healing and stuff of that nature. This is the Hoodoo Tarot. And in that healing, because I felt like it wasn't healing well, which is not a surprise because of my Lyme disease, it affects the whole body. But, so I was looking for alternative ways to help with healing, and one of the things I ended up turning to was shamanism, and so that opens its own, it isn't really a Pandora's box because that sounds negative, but another plethora, of connecting, and I'm very bad in my shamanic journey about asking questions, but certainly spirits, the connection with spirits, how spirits connect to us, and all of that kind of stuff. And I brought out the Hoodoo Tarot because I remember in the springtime of this year, I decided to use this deck for a Memorial Day reading, and it became clear to me in the reading, as I looked at it, who specifically in spirit, somebody who was deceased, that was a relative, was functioning as like a family guardian. And it was just so interesting to me. It was so interesting to me. And so then the whole ancestor and I'm sure, I don't know that anybody had suggested to me, and I don't feel like I have any, do I feel like I'm a good card reader? Sure. Am I flawless? Can I read fast? No. But do I feel like I'm a good card? Sure. I'm not gonna, I'm not going to beat myself up as a tarot reader. But at the same time, I don't feel like I'm some ultimate tarot reader that everybody should get a reading from because I'm going to blow their mind. I don't feel like that's the case either. Sometimes I blow people's mind, sometimes not. Often that has to do with how aware they are of their lives, and if they've got their crap together, sometimes they don't have a very spectacular reading. But I don't feel like Like I'm not somebody who's ever been aware of ghosts. I'm not somebody who receives spontaneous messages like without tarot cards. Very rarely. Like the person who came up in the cards that this deck gave me on that day is somebody who I once did come to me in a dream, which kind of confused me, you know. So that tells you where I'm at, right? It's just like, why did I have a dream about this person? It's so weird. And then dismiss it, you know, and it's, but anyway, but again, it's not like there's a lot of intruding thoughts or that I'm particularly sensitive to these things. But what has happened is that as I ask questions and become more open, that these things do come more easily or open up more, and I learn about also boundaries to set in place and stuff, but not entirely. And it makes me a little bit sad, really, that there are kind of so few, I don't know how to say it. There are some teachers, but there are very few. I would say this. There aren't casual teachers in, say, my relations or broadly in the community where when you're starting to explore these things that you can just go to them. Some people are lucky and their family has been doing this for years or something, and oh yes, I understand why you're doing that. Or where you would say, you know, I had a dream in which this recently deceased person, you know, appeared very vividly. And instead of making everybody uncomfortable, it would be, oh, that's lovely. So I come from, I guess I would say, from a family that has a very rational approach to everything. And because of some mental health issues with people who have not been very rational in the family, I think that there is a leeriness about things that are not grounded in rational thought, rational, evidence-based thought. So I would almost say that I came to tarot and oracle reading and was engaged in it, mainly, again, oracle reading, for many years without feeling particularly spiritual. And it's funny because people used to say, it's like I would say, I'm not religious. I would just tell people, it's weird because I didn't necessarily identify as atheist, or it would freak people out when I would say that, and then they would, how do I want to say it? And then I would just say that I'm not religious, and then they would say, oh, but people always felt, I don't know if this is just like trying to say, oh, she says she's not religious, that's bad, and so we need to patch that up a little bit, and then say, but yes, but you always strike me as very spiritual. And it's like, I'm not sure what they meant by that. And I would just say, oh, that's nice, thank you. I just had no idea what they were talking about. I'm not sure I still would. This is just, this is the Fairy Ring Oracle, and I'm bringing it out because if I hadn't learned to ask other questions of communication, questions outside, so, you know, one thing that's very popular in the community, and I can certainly get behind, is asking deeper questions of yourself. And I would say why questions about my life, and I would definitely credit the YouTube community in spurring me to ask more why questions about myself. And so that has been valuable in terms of being a use of the cards, a way to use the cards. you know, certainly it has been interesting in terms of self-examination. You know, I'm no more a perfect person than anybody else on the planet, but I haven't had some of the trauma that a lot of people seem to be using tarot or oracle cards to work through. So those kinds of why questions of myself, I think it's very good for me to do that, and to continue to do that for things that still seem quite stuck or that I don't understand, mainly like reactions that I have and stuff like that. But I think that the more interesting thing that I've gotten out of this whole, you know, the art of asking questions is to stop and say, this deck, the fairy ring, I can't see using it most of the time in readings for other people or for the why, well, maybe the why questions for myself. But what I ended up doing is I asked it about my land. So in other words, I used it as a tool of communication with X, whatever X is. In this case, the X was spirits of the land on which I live. And then I got a really interesting set of cards, and really in large part, other than just the whole fairy lore, we've got a really good book, the fairy lore aspect of this deck, is I was like, aha, I have found a way to use this deck. I can use this deck to inquire about, you know, the spirits of place, spirits of the land. Maybe I will find other uses for it as well. But 6 years ago, would I have thought to ask about the spirits of the land? I think not. I think not. That I can credit probably to no specific person, but to a number of different people. Some channels that aren't very active anymore and stuff like that, that have kind of opened my thinking up. And another is past lives reading. And so this is art history for past lives. That is, you know, I was okay with the idea that when you die, you go back to the earth and that's it. You know, I was totally comfortable with that. I'm still comfortable with that if that's what turns out to be the case. And there is no, you know, spiritual essence that lives on or repeats. But this deck, I use this deck to explore the possibility. And the cards that came up made so much sense for certain things I was asking about that it really cracked open. I mean, I essentially got this deck saying, I wonder. And so I will use this deck, which isn't fair really, to decide one way or the other. You know, if I get nothing out of this deck when I make these inquiries that makes any sense to me, then I'll write it off. This is not a particularly expensive indie deck. And as it turned out, it was really interesting and really relevant and made so much sense. And again, it's like psychologically, it is useful to frame the things I was asking about in terms of past lives. So even if it is not true, quote unquote, that there are previous lives, etc., even if it's not true, it is psychologically useful to explore and look at certain hang-ups I'll just call them that, in this way. So essentially, this deck and the questioning that occurs on Tarottube opened me up to the whole guardian spirit thing, the, past lives exploration, questioning earth spirits, which I think I pretty much felt that they were there anyway, but I would never have. I think when you're on the land and you are loving being on the land, that is a form of communication with the land. But I would never have thought to have a conversation or ask questions, or look into why is there a problem with this land, or how could I ameliorate the problem with this land. I would never have thought to do that. So I can credit others really for pushing me to do that, mainly through spreads that are suggested. But in this case, there's also that tarot deck. Although that tarot, I probably went looking for that tarot deck based on somebody's spread about past lives that they shared as a VR or as a tarot tag or something like that. And then I don't feel particularly motivated to do mediumship. But I am now doing the missing persons thing, the missing persons channel, where I pull cards around missing people in an effort to understand what happened. And to be honest, I don't think I would have done that. Now the idea of doing this was really introduced to me by my friend Lark. And I totally balked at it the first time. She's like, oh, I don't want to be responsible for predicting something in this situation that, I wouldn't even if it was just between her and I, I was not, we're not going public, we're not putting, I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to be responsible for putting out potentially negative vibes by seeing something that was not positive in terms of the missing person. But I think that through doing these readings that are communicating with something other than my inner world, or essentially my inner world, or another living person, and my shamanic work, in which to me a lot of the shamanic work is sort of directed by me or requested by me, but I am not doing it. It is my guides who are doing it. And that whole notion that I'm being provided with information through the cards. The cards are a tool, like an alphabet, but an alphabet of images. And so a message is attempting to be given to me, and it's my job to interpret it. And also it's also the responsibility of the person who is receiving the reading, watching the reading, to make their own interpretation, to fit it or let it tweak their understanding in a way that might bring insights beyond even what I'm able to provide. And I think that makes me a little bit braver and a little bit more willing to be, it makes me braver. It also, because I feel like it's something beyond me that is providing the messages, it also somehow makes me more willing to be fallible. I guess I understand where I'm the weak link, which is the interpretation, and I'm more comfortable saying, this is my interpretation of the cards, and is it perfectly accurate? I don't know. I mean, that's for others to decide as things play out, or in the case of missing persons cases, as research continues. And so I actually end up, I feel like I'm kind of in an intermediary and in the service of bringing information in, whether or not it's believed. And so I end up with a higher tolerance for coming across as an idiot. It's like, all right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to say this, I'm going to put this out there. Could it be wrong? Yes, my interpretation could be wrong, but my intention is a positive one, and I feel like if I can bring any, not perfect, not perfectly accurate, if I can bring any additional insights or understanding or a different way of looking at something that triggers a shift that turns out to be useful, then my job is done. I just don't feel, for me personally, that I am going to be perfectly accurate, and somehow I'm okay with that. I don't know. There's been a shift there. I don't feel as bad. Now, if I were sitting one-on-one with somebody, well, but I have had people who have said, well, I can't see how that would happen. I don't see that, doesn't fit in with my understanding of the situation. And then I said, all right, I'm sorry you didn't get more out of this. That's what I have for you, or whatever. And then later it turns out, in fact, something, the thing that the person was skeptical about did come to pass. So, yeah. There's definitely a letting go of the result. And I think that's partly because I'm not. If I were asking money for it, I might feel differently, or have a policy in place where if somebody said they didn't get anything out of the reading, that I would refund, I don't know, I think I would say 50%. Because again, just because you don't understand what it means or how it's significant now doesn't mean that in 3 weeks or a month or tomorrow it doesn't dawn on you. That's the way it works. Yeah. So, there you go, Bronia. Or Bronia. I'm trying to say your name correctly. I don't know if that's what you were looking for. That's my rambly. That's what you get. My rambly attempt to explain my growth and development as a card reader, and where particularly the influence of YouTube has taken me, which has just been, it's just been a huge, this community and what it offers has just been a huge part of it, because like I said, otherwise I would not have a community. I would not have these things to stretch me in different directions and have me ask different kinds of things. Yeah. So thank you to everybody out there, and thank you to Lark, who has pushed me in various ways, even when I wasn't ready. And yeah. And even though it's controversial these days, all of the people who encourage you to try different decks and stuff, because, one of the things I do is I get a deck and I think, what questions is this deck good for? And so I start asking questions, and I start experimenting with questions. I even started doing, the deck suggests the question, where you pull cards where the deck is saying you need to ask questions about. So, yeah, the art of questioning. And I would add this too. Part of the reason that the art of questioning is important for me is because my life is not exciting. So, I don't have a lot of things in my everyday life that are spurring me to ask questions. So I need to ask some of these oblique, odd, different, tangential kinds of questions than your everyday questions, whether they're questions about me psychologically or again, that kind of emotional, environmental, situational awareness type of question is, communication, otherly communication. All right, everybody, another ramble. I hope I didn't have any hiccups where I ended up going slow-mo on you with the audio. And I will talk to you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.